Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome back to the CAIR Youth Advisory Committee podcast. My name is Amina Najat, and I'm a rising freshman in college.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Miriam Siraj, and I am a rising senior in high school.
And I'm Suhaila Abdi, and I'm a rising sophomore at college.
And today we're going to be talking about dawah, or spreading Islam, and the role that young Muslim Americans can play in it. And today we also have a special guest with us. This is Brother Hamzah Henshaw. He's assistant head of school at Al-Nur Academy, the only Islamic high school in New England. He's also a middle and high school English teacher, the guidance counselor at the school, and what he thinks is a pre-professional tennis player. So Brother Hamzah, welcome.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Got a little tennis plug in there. That's good. Alhamdulillah. It's great to be here. Nice to see you, Amina, alhamdulillah, and nice to meet you, Suhaila and Mariam. And it's an honor to be here with you guys.
Mm-hmm. All right, and just for a little context, Brother Hamzah has been my English teacher for 7 years now. That's why he knows me. So Let's get on with it. So the first question I have for you guys is, what is dawah, first of all? And if any of you guys have had any experiences with either giving it or receiving it, whether that be from another Muslim or even maybe somebody from another religion.
Yeah, for starters, dawah is basically the act of inviting or calling people to embrace Islam in its perfect form. So that can, be somebody coming up to you asking questions regarding Islam, and dawah can be you seeking knowledge, etc. So yeah, it's just the acting of inviting people to Islam.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really interesting thing that you said about in its perfect form, meaning, exposing people to Islam the way it actually is and not a distorted version of it, because you could argue that, these super famous Muslim terrorists are spreading Islam or informing people of Islam, but because, it is not in the correct form, it would not constitute dawah, right?
So, what do you guys think about? Actually, I didn't have anything prepared. That was such a long pause. I'm so sorry.
I can fill it in. I just felt like I was talking for too long.
No, that was perfect. And then I just didn't know where where you're supposed to go from there. I'm sorry, this is like so messed up.
Yeah.
Hamzah,
It's okay. I mean, I think just have a conversation. Like conversations forget that we're on camera, forget that we're being recorded, and just let's just talk to each other, and then there will be good nuggets that they can keep, and Mohammed can have a fun job editing. But inshallah, I think it will be fine. Just have an organic conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to do like dawah experiences, or?
I mean, first I kind of want to talk about the topic in general. So I think talking about the different forms that dawah could take. So it's, all right, let's maybe get into that. Definitely feel free to cut me off and jump in, and if I talk too long, please stop me. But okay. I also think it's important to note that dawah isn't necessarily intentionally trying to, convince someone that Islam is the truth or whatever, right? It's not like you're Jehovah's Witness knocking on everybody's door being like, join us. Dawah can take many forms. So it could be, the act of answering somebody's questions about Islam. It could be just through your actions as well, right? Through your everyday conduct, if somebody sees you as, someone who's truthful, somebody who's trustworthy, somebody of integrity, that is sort of dawah in a more subvert form. Okay, so somebody here who has a lot of experience with dawah, and a lot of times dawah that's done in the more non-traditional form, is Brother Hamzah here. So we brought him here to tell his story, if you'd be willing to do so.
Sure. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So alhamdulillah, as Amina introduced me, I work at Al-Nur Academy, and alhamdulillah, I've been there. This will be my 9th year coming up, inshallah. And so a lot of people have said, how how is it that you ended up teaching at an Islamic school and made that sort of a big career choice? So it all goes back to my own high school experience. So I went to a school called St. Mark's, which is a boarding school in Southborough, Massachusetts. So this is a school where my father had gone, and then my grandfather had gone, and various other family members. So it was a sort of a big Henshaw family tradition to go to this school. And so when I arrived there freshman year, I wasn't necessarily looking, for a religious awakening. I was just going to school for, because it was a boarding school. My parents were busy and everything. And so in any case, when I first arrived there was a student named Nabil. So he had a fascinating background. He's Canadian in terms of his passport and nationality, but he was born in Kenya in East Africa, and he ethnically he's Desi, like he's Gujarati Indian, and so his story is also very interesting. His family were traders who left India and came to Kenya a while ago, and Hamzah did very well there, and then his that's sort of where he grew up, and then eventually his family moved to Vancouver, and so he's a very worldly guy, very fascinating guy, and just had a presence about him that was just really, he looked different than everyone else, right? And also, I started to notice as we became friends, we were living in the dorm. So obviously in the dorm, you're living right on top of each other. You brush your teeth and everything in the communal bathrooms and everything. So every night Nabil would be doing this weird ritual, with the water, and he'd be like, putting his hands in and then washing his forearms and stuff. And, we were all, thinking he's a little bit strange, this is a little unusual. And then the coup de grace was when he would take his feet and put them in the sink. And so obviously, we're young kids. If someone does something different, then your first reaction is to make fun of them. So that was where we went with that. But he was one of those guys like Teflon type personality. Like everything just bounced off of him. It didn't work to make fun of him. It got turned on you and so on. So essentially, like, we came to respect it. Like, okay, this is just his thing. He does that. And then he would go back to his dorm room and he would leave the door slightly open and he would call the adhan out loud. So even though he was praying alone, he would still call the adhan. So in other words, he's completely unapologetic about his practice of Islam, which I think is one of the first in terms of dawah lessons. It wasn't so much that Nabil came there with the intention, I'm going to preach Islam to these people. Instead, he's just like, I'm going to practice Islam, it's as completely as I can, and if other people are interested in that, then alhamdulillah, Allah will send my way. So I think a lot of times when it comes to dawah, the most important thing you can do is actually work on yourself. If you work on your own practice and your own Islam, then it's like a magnet, like people will be drawn towards you. And that has been my experience throughout my life. Whenever I've been at sort of a spiritual high point, and on the things that I've been really thinking well Islamically, Allah has sent people my way who have either, taken their shahada or at least been interested and spoken about Islam. So I think a lot of it is really about working on yourself. So Nabil came to school and he did have this concern in his heart, this fikr for dawah and how people would learn about it. So anyway, we would hear him calling the adhan, and then we'd see him praying. We'd look through the door and he'd be praying. And so, this was interesting. I saw it there. I saw it at the sport. We were on the football team together. So like after practice, he'd sometimes have to pray Asr, and he'd be standing on the side of the road. Side of the field. He'd use like the athletic water bottles to make wudu and stuff. So it's just like, that's just who he is. And you're like, oh, alhamdulillah, that's cool. That's interesting. So that was, September of 1992 or something. We were ninth graders, freshmen. So the next major thing that happened was, I think it was Parents' Weekend that year, which was probably like October, maybe Columbus Day or something like that, or Indigenous Peoples' Day, sorry. So at that point, you know, my parents lived locally, so they came during the day, and then they left to go home, and I was sitting in the dorm, and I was feeling a little sorry for myself because most of the people, their parents had like flown in from wherever, and they were like out at the hotel, or they were having like a good time, and I was feeling sorry for myself. And so I was just sort of wandering through the hallways of the dorm, and I smelled this delicious food. And, you know, I am a lover of food. I continue to be one. So so I started following my nose through the hallway, and eventually it got really strong outside of Nabil's door. And so I sort of accidentally on purpose pushed the door open, and he was sitting there on the floor with his, he called him a cousin brother, which I don't know, I guess it's a DC thing. But he was sitting on the floor, and they looked up at me, and they could see that I was like interested in them, but really my eyes were glued to the food, right? And so they're like, "Tfaddal, come." And there's again a Dawah principle, like just the generosity. I mean, when I think about Nabil, like his defining trait, and the thing which attracted me to him was just how generous he was. I think in American culture, like in boarding school culture, when you go to BJ's or Costco or wherever and you get your blow pops, you like put them under lock and key, and you're protecting them from everyone. Nabil, whatever he had, he would share, he would give out freely. I mean, Hamzah, he did come from a very, you know, successful, wealthy family. So some of his generosity was because of that, but it was much more than that. There are lots of wealthy people who are not nearly as generous. So mashallah, whenever we'd go out for dinner or something, he'd always, you know, be buying, you know, paying for things, and just, he was just incredibly generous, and so on. So anyway, he's sitting there eating it turned out to be goat curry, which is now my favorite dish. And then they were drinking masala chai, you know, that really great desi chai with the like cardamom. And all right, I'm gonna get really hungry if I talk about this. So so in any case, I sat down with them and just dug in, and they were eating with their hands, another sunnah, you know. So again, practicing the sunnah is incredibly beautiful. So any sunnah you bring into your life and you have conviction in it, then it will draw people towards you. So some things are really hard to do. It's hard to put your foot in the sink in front of other people, right? Most of us try to find a private bathroom, or like we find ways, workarounds, we wipe over our socks or do things like that. But when you actually practice the sunnah like unapologetically, then it's great. So Nabil used to eat with his hands a lot, even in the cafeteria and so on. That was just his thing. And again, you know, that was appealing to me on some level. So that was when Nabil actually gave me my name. So my first Muslim name was Mahbub Chaiwala. So Mahbub, beloved, and Chaiwala is like the guy who sells chai. Like, so I later discovered this was actually more of a joke. It wasn't like necessarily intended. But a chaiwala, actually, if you've ever been to India, which Hamzah did have the chance to go to India, they're like, when you pull into a train station in India, there are these guys who wear like essentially teapots on their back. It's like a backpack made of a teapot, and they go chai garamande chai, and they're trying to sell their tea. And so, you know, you're at the station for like 5 minutes, and you're like, yeah, chai, and then they come and they like bend over and like pour the chai. And anyway, that's a chaiwala. And Nabil himself had just come back from India and known about chaiwalas and so on. So he gave me this name. So for the longest time, that was my Muslim name, Mahbub Chaiwala. And a few years later, after I graduated from St. Mark's, and I took a year off between high school and college, and I was in England, and I was at this masjid, you know, and the imam, it's like, oh, there's an American Muslim here. It's like, what's your good name, brother? And I was like, oh, I'm Mahbub Chaiwala. And the imam just started laughing and laughing and laughing, because I mean, at that point I realized, okay, this probably is not a traditional name. So he actually named me Mahbub Allah, or Mahbub Illahi, like the beloved of Allah, because he said that is a more appropriate name. So that was, for a short time, that was my name. Eventually I got the name Hamzah, which was actually, I chose that one myself. But people who know me from a long time ago know me as Brother Mahbub. So that's how I can tell people who knew me from, you know, the OG Hamzah or the OG Mahbub. Alhamdulillah. So that was the start of an incredible friendship with Nabil, and we became very, very close friends at that point. But there were two others, other people who also were getting interested in Islam. And so the way it would work is in the dorm, there'd be like lights out, right? So at 11 o'clock or whatever it was, that you'd have to turn out your lights. So what would happen is on the weekends, I think Saturday nights, you'd have the lights out, the prefects would be out there, and eventually they would go to sleep. And then you could sort of, if you wanted to be brave, you could sneak out of your room and go to your friends' rooms and so on. This was a common thing. So we started, the three of us who were interested in Islam started sneaking out of our rooms after lights out, like at midnight, and going to Nabil's room. And we would just sit and we would just talk. And he had all these Islamic books, like sort of funky stuff that you don't see that often. Like one that I remember was called Spectacles of Death. And it was all about like Yom al-Qiyamah and like what happens to you after you die. And it was like really crazy, because I don't know. I mean, I grew up in a Christian family and so on, but they're very like wishy-washy when it comes to like what happens after you die. Like, oh, you go to a better place. And, I mean, I'm sure there is a theology, but like at least the Episcopalian tradition that I went to, that was not, they never really broke it down for you exactly what happens, like when you die, it's like when your deeds get weighed and so on by Allah and everything. And so it's just like, whoa, this is like crazy. It was, it really like blew our minds and talking about this. And obviously there was Nabil, who had like a lot of conviction and everything that he read. So it wasn't just stories. It was like, this is the truth, And so, I remember at one point he said, I want to tell you a sentence that's more powerful than everything else in the world, than everything that's in the world and all that it contains. And I was like, a sentence? And then I said, okay. And so then he said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And I remember when he said it, I felt like this like electricity go through my body. It was like crazy, it's just like, whoa, this is like serious. Again, I didn't know anything. I was in ninth grade. I was like 14 years old. I didn't know anything about the world or life or anything, but I could tell there was something like pretty special about this. So that's sort of my first introduction, ninth grade year. So those other two boys got increasingly interested. And Hamzah later they embraced Islam. I guess so. For me, the next part of the story was fourth form, 10th grade year, when Nabil's parents had gone for Hajj, sort of a fancy 4-star type Hajj with or 5-star type Hajj with a guy with Hakeem Olajuwon. So Hakeem Olajuwon at that time was Houston Rockets. He's like the best player in the NBA essentially. So I don't know who the current best player. I guess LeBron, but he wasn't quite LeBron. LeBron's a little bit higher than him, but still, he was an amazing center, and he was like, he had just won like the NBA playoffs and so on. So, but he'd also, he's Nigerian, and he had started taking Islam much more seriously. So he was the Rockets were playing the Celtics, and Nabil's family and Nabil invited Hakeem to come out and speak to us as a class. And instead of talking about the NBA and what that was like, he talked about Islam and how important Islam was and centered him, and how it was the most important thing in his life. And I remember he sat on the floor. He was still enormous. I mean, he's like over 7 feet tall. And so even sitting on the floor, he was just like towered over all of us. And then after the public lecture thing, we went up to the dorm, and Hakeem was there in the bedroom, and like, they have to like bend over to like enter the door because he's so tall and so on. But it was great, and so they were praying. So this was before I'd like taken Shahada, but I knew something about Salat. I'd seen it before, so I decided to pray with them. And that was one thing. Then later we had some other speakers, some great da'is, who came and spoke to the entire chapel and so on. And that's actually, so for Huzaifa and Nuruddin, the other two who became Muslim, they actually became Muslim before me. And it was from some of these other speakers. They just were convinced of the truth of this, and they decided to take their Shahada. I think they may have actually done it at MIT. Back in that time, there was sort of a weekly program at MIT. This was long before they had their Musalla. This was in some other part of the campus. And so I think they went there one night and sort of publicly took their Shahada. I like you know, I was in some weird nether state where I sort of thought I was Muslim, but I'd never really taken Shahada and so on. But I like to hang out with them and like, I mean, so a little bit of it's hazy. And I think over the years, I've sort of, people ask me all the time, how did you become Muslim? And so I have to tell them a story, right? So I have a story that I tell, and I know there's lots of truth in that story. I don't know the exact mechanism because Allah works in his own way. So I honestly never remember like publicly taking Shahada the way you've probably seen people take Shahada. Like, in fact, I got really scared like 10 years ago or something. I was at the masjid and I was like, you know, I never really took Shahada. Maybe none of this counted. And so then they're like, oh, Abdul Badia, who is like my big mentor, you know, he's like, okay, raise your, you know, he's like, repeat after me, ashadu, you know, and then I took Shahada again. So, and you know, anyway, sorry, we're getting a little off track. But you know, eventually the time where I think I really became Muslim was Nabil and his cousin, the same one from the goat curry incident, invited us to New York. There was an ijtima, which is like a big, you know, gathering meeting. And so I later discovered that Nabil was part of this group called the Tablighi Jamaat, which you may be familiar with. I don't know if you are. So they're a group, it's sort of a social movement that started in India. And it was really about giving dawah, but not so much dawah to non-Muslims, but really, essentially the thesis would be that Muslims ourselves, we are very far from the actual practice of Islam. And so before we can even think about giving dawah to non-Muslims, we should instead, you know, give dawah or reminders to one another so that we improve our own practice, you know, and there's a lot of truth to that. What I've noticed, so Abdul Badia is like the emir of this group in Boston still to this day. And I would say, I don't know what the exact number is, but I would say it's probably over 10,000 people, literally 10,000 people have taken Shahada with him over the years. He's an incredible person and has like, you know, just has had an amazing life, traveled all over the world doing this. But again, he's not really giving dawah to non-Muslims. He's giving, his focus is he goes out to remind Muslims. But what happens is when you're really practicing the deen, people, like I said, are attracted to you and they come to you and they ask you questions. Abdul Badia has some amazing, he said one time they were on Jamaat and they were going to visit Muslims and they were walking along and they do like the full sunnah thing, like the white thobe, the white turban, you know, the staff, like the, you know, all out, like, you know, like Osama's walking down the street, right? But you know, they're walking with like dhikr, they talk about dhikr and fikr. You walk with dhikr on your tongue and fikr in your heart. Like, how can all the people become Muslim? Like, everyone's going to die. Everyone has to stand in front of Allah. We need to remind people that that's our whole mission. So they're saying that, you know, so it's like a deeply spiritual thing. So he said they were walking, I don't know where this was, maybe Ohio or somewhere. They were walking past a church and there was a guy inside the church and he looked up and he saw this group of like 4 or 5 Muslims walking along with their staff and everything. He ran out of the church. He came to Abdul Badia. He grabbed hold of his thobe. He got down on his hands and knees. He grabbed hold of his thobe and he's like, brother, you got to tell me the truth because they're telling me lies in there. And like, he was like, you know, like this wasn't his intention. He wasn't going to the church. He wasn't, you know, but this guy, so he's like, okay, brother, what I want you to do is I want you to go home. I want you to take a shower. I want you to put on your cleanest clothes and I want you to meet us here at the masjid. And so, you know, the guy an hour later comes in his like Sunday best, you know, to the masjid and takes the shahada there. And you know, so, and he has like hundreds, thousands of stories just like that. So I really think there is something, you know, like it's good to have the niyyah of dawah and everything that we do. But I think the single best thing you can do, if you wanted my advice, is to work on your own practice, of Islam, and then Allah will use us. You know, I think when you turn the focus towards dawah for dawah's sake, it's like, you know, oftentimes you're speaking about a message that you're not really fully implementing yourself. And so, it's, you know, in my experience, the more you work on yourself, the more Allah will use you for the sake of dawah. And so really that's, you know, that's my story. I mean, I went to this ijtima in New York and I remember, you know, it was a weird, I'd never really slept in a masjid before, of course. Didn't have a lot of experience sleeping on like the floor of a building with like 300 other bearded men, and so I mean literally it's so loud. Like I guess most men snore. This was something I guess I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know that necessarily, but being in the masjid, like it's just like, so it's hard to sleep, and so I'm sitting there, and then it's like 2, 3 in the morning, and I see these guys like, waking up, and they're making wudu, and then they come, and they were making like these 2 rakat that like I've never seen. I mean, you don't see your average everyday Muslim ever pray like this. It's like 45 minutes to do your 2 rakat, and then like dua with like tears and everything. You're like, I mean, now knowing what I know, and like, how unusual that is. Most people, like, and myself included, like Islam is like something that we do, and we go through the rituals and the practices. We try to get as much benefit from it, but we're not necessarily going fully into it, right? But these guys, mashallah, they're like the piety. Like I was just very fortunate to be introduced not just to Islam, but to like an incredibly pious group of Muslims, like that I still look up to tremendously to this day. And I assumed that that's what all Muslims were like. So I had a lot of learning to do. That's actually not the way Islam is implemented in general within the Ummah. So but it was an incredible experience. You like as someone growing up here in the West, like you just, I don't know, you don't get exposed to truth on this level. Like it's like you're so yeah, that was pretty much my story. So that was about 1994. I was 15 years old. So I took Shahada, not very publicly, but at least in my heart. And I started practicing Islam to the best of my ability. Didn't have a lot of guidance. Nabil was really there. And in retrospect, Nabil didn't know very much about the deen. Like I didn't have a brother Sufyan. I didn't have people who really know what they're talking about. We were very much, it was almost like practicing Islam in prison. And I have a lot of friends who became Muslim in prison. And you just don't have many sources, but you glom onto those sources, whatever you do have, and you sort of practice it very fully. So that was pretty much the story. Again, that was a 10th grade year, and so on. And then after that, life went on. I took a year off between high school and college, and alhamdulillah, I got into Harvard and decided to go there for school. And eventually, after graduating and trying to figure out my life, I did go into Islamic finance. That was my first sort of career, and still something I'm interested in. But eventually, I sort of came into education. And really, I think one of the reasons I teach at Al-Nur as opposed to, I don't know, at the college level or something like that, is I think there's something really special about this age. This is a youth podcast, right? So there's something really special about the age of about 15. I have met so many Muslims, converts, reverts over the years, who that's the age when they became Muslim. And I'm sure it's true for many born Muslims that that's the age when they made a decision in their life about their practice of Islam. And the people who are really serious about it and are able to maintain their iman through the incredibly difficult years, teenage and young adult years, and being in college and being in an environment where maintaining your iman is incredibly difficult. The people who do that, it usually comes back to something that happened right around 15 years old. And so there's some very special mystical thing I think about that age. And that's why, I feel like devoting my career, or a good chunk of my career, to this is great. I think having Al-Nur as a school in our community that that caters to the Muslims and tries to teach young Muslims the basics of Islam so they can go off and practice. Hamza, I think as a school we do a good job with a lot of things, like Hamzah, sister Sihem, Amina's mom, is an amazing teacher. Hamzah, I do the best I can with English, and we have a good academic program, but really more than anything, it's that people graduate with like an Islamic identity. Islam is something important to them, and it's something that they carry forward. And so I think, one of these things, if we're going to make Islam important to us, is this fikr of dawah. We should have concern. We shouldn't just, there's a tendency in sort of a liberal college campus, everyone's very accepting. Like you'll go there, you guys, mashallah, the sisters are very obvious, like you're wearing the flag of Islam wherever you go. It's very easy for brothers to just blend into the background and like, especially if they don't have a beard, but even if they do, it can be like.
Actually, like I just to kind of like throw in a comment, like I actually gotta say, like Neil is like definitely like one of a like a very rare group of people. Like I feel like I don't know, like I'm not sure if Suhaili you can relate to this too, but like I feel like being like a Muslim in a public school setting, like I feel like I mean, despite me wearing a hijab and stuff, like I feel like I'm still very like cautious in a weird way to like not come off as preachy. And like I don't know, I just feel like there's this like certain balance where like I don't want to like come out here and start forcing it. Like I like for instance, like at my school, like we're trying to implement like praying at school. Like this is the school's the oldest in like one of the oldest in like I think in United States. And it's like it's so interesting because like we've never had prayer like availability at the school, and like it's just so weird to kind of be out here like I'm gonna put my foot in the sink. Like I just feel like I would never think to do that in front of other people. Like that's just so bold, and like mashallah, like I think that's like so cool that you got to have that experience.
Another interesting thing that happened at St. Mark's was, so there were 3 of us who ended up embracing Islam. So you can imagine like our families had different reactions. My family, for the most part, was very accepting. They're like, okay, this, whatever you want. And one of the other brothers, similar, but one of them, his parents were pretty upset about it. They were frustrated. They're like, I send my son to St. Mark's and he comes back as a Muslim. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong with you guys? And so it was a nominally Episcopalian school. So they had a chaplain. So they sent the chaplain, and I actually just met up with the friends last weekend, and he was retelling me this story. But like the chaplain, pulled him aside and like tried to give him like a come to Jesus type talk, and essentially tried to like preach the good, the Christian word. And obviously it fell flat. And anyway, there ended up being some sort of controversy with that chaplain. She ended up leaving the school, and then they brought in this new chaplain, Preston Hannibal, who's an amazing guy, African-American guy, and he was just like life-changing, and he was like, we're going to help you guys establish Islam here. What do you guys need? And we're like, well, Jummah is an important thing. We don't have a place for Jummah in a time. So we actually started praying in the crypt of the church. They're down like below the church, and and there were some other Muslims at the school. There were like Saudi exchange students and some other people who would never have dreamed of asking for prayer space. I mean, that's the thing. Like, one of the nice things here in America is like, it is a place where if you ask for your rights, people are gonna bend over backwards to accommodate you. So if you want to pray at school, like absolutely, just go for it. Like without any, holding back. Just be. Like look at all the other groups.
Really? I don't know. I feel like I feel like to some degree it really depends on like the school that you're at, because like I feel like there are like I've been to it, like I don't know. What about you, Suhaila? Like I feel like does Northeastern like have a prayer space? I did need to say Northeastern.
Yeah, we
college.
do. Yeah, we do actually have a space. Yeah.
Do your friends usually like, I don't know, like your other friends in like different colleges like have prayer spaces to your knowledge, or like I don't know?
I think majority of them, I think they do have spaces, or they share like other university spaces as well. Yeah.
Unless things have changed, and I'm sure they've gotten better, not worse. So I graduated from Harvard in 2001, and so at that time, I would say every college had some sort of facility, at least for their Muslim students. Now, some like MIT was great because it was open to the wider Muslim community. So there are a lot of cab drivers and other people who would come there. Harvard's Musalla is in the basement of a freshman dorm, and it's like swipe card access. So you can have people there, but it's not easy. You can't just say, hey, come to the Harvard Musalla. And you know, Northeasterns, I don't know if it's changed, but it used to be sort of buried like in a deep in campus. It was a little hard to find. Like, so, you know, the Muslims on campus know where it's at, but it's not like a public thing. But now you guys have ISBCC, and you have, you know, Hamzah, we had ISB in Cambridge when I was there. And so you have actual like Islamic institutions right down in that same area. So, you know, Hamzah, I think, you know, Islam is definitely, not exploded, but it's come a long way. You know, it's so much easier to get halal food. It's so much easier there's so many more masajid, places for Jummah, you know, et cetera, than, you know, it's not like I'm not, they like to tell me I'm old, like Amina and her friends, but I don't think I'm very old. But I guess I have been in the Boston Muslim scene for like 25 years, and you know, it has really developed. Alhamdulillah.
I think that's fair. I don't know. I feel like for me, like I guess I'm more so thinking like the high school space, like middle school. Like I feel like it would be tough for me to like, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was just because I'm like pretty reserved, or like I like.
What do you think? Like sometimes the best thing to do in that situation is to like do like a worst case scenario type thought. Like, okay, I go to the administrator, whoever it is, head of the upper school, or the student dean, or whatever it is, and I try to advocate for myself. I say, hey, you know, there's some Muslims at school, and you know, we really want to be able to pray. Like, what's the response that they could give you that would like shut you down and make you feel like, you know?
I mean, I feel like the worst possible scenario is that they could just say no, and I know that's so simple. But like, I just feel like there's so much that goes into just being the first person. And for the most part, like in the spaces that I'm in, like I feel like there's not as much of a push from my peers, like other Muslim kids. There's, first of all, there's not a lot of us. And then for the ones who are there, they don't mind just waiting till they get home to pray. And I don't mind either, but like I would like to pray at school. I'd like to have that option. And it's just, I don't know, like I just feel like it's very much going against the grain sometimes.
So I think one thing I would say is like it's much easier to do things as a group rather than as individuals. So, you know, ideally, as long as you have at least one other person, like Hamzah, we had Nabil, and then there were 4 of us and so on. And so it was easy, you know, to sort of advocate for ourselves. But I think, you know, if you're in, I mean, you know, I never went to public school myself, and that I did teach at a you know, private school, but it was for younger kids and so on. We did have a few Muslim kids, and then now I'm at an Islamic school, so obviously it's a totally different beast. But I'm pretty sure, because I have lots of friends or you know, people with kids who are very, you know, observant and whatnot. Like if you just advocate for yourself, and it's not just about Islam, I would say about absolutely any aspect of your life, like having that ability to just advocate and like you have a point of view and you want to share that point of view, not in a pushy kind of way, but like you want to like get it out there, what you're feeling about something. When you do that, people tend to really respect that, and you get what you're looking for more, you know. So like I said before, I think when it comes to dawah and stuff, I mean, I know we're talking about praying in the school, but a lot of it comes down to our own state. Like, you know, obviously if you can pray at home and like you're not going to miss the salat time, but at least when I mean, maybe our school day went longer, but like dhuhr was impossible to pray unless you prayed it at school in the wintertime, right? Like you'd be missing dhuhr, and then you'd have to like say, okay, I'm going to take some rukhsa, like, oh, maybe it rained today. I don't know. Like there's weird like fiqhy things you can do to try to like justify to yourself that you just missed a prayer. But like, I don't know, one of the things about hanging out with those Muslims was like, they stressed the importance of prayer. Like prayer is like the first thing to be reckoned on the day of judgment and so on. And so they're like, never willingly miss a prayer. Like it's, yes, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to sleep in. You know, the time comes and you're, oh my God, I missed the heart. You know, it's going to happen. But if you know that the time is there and you can in any way, you have to make tayammum, you have to do whatever you have to do, never miss a prayer. And that got ingrained on me like really, really early. And so at that point, it's like, yeah, you know, any job I've had or something. I mean, I'm not like Nabil. I don't like go and put my feet in the sink if I can avoid it. Like I'll go to and find a private bathroom and make wudu and so on. But at the same time, like, you know, if I have to pray, I have to pray, you know. I mean, it's like you're at South Station, your train's about to leave, you're like, I don't want to pray on the train. So khalas, I'm gonna find a like little quiet area at South Station and I'm gonna do it, you know. I don't know. I mean, I understand that I, you know, ethnically or whatever, you know, as a white male, like it's not like the world is stacked against me. Like right there, you have a lot of privilege, or like the way you think about issues is shaped by that, like unconsciously. But I definitely find like just, you know, if it's something that's important to you and you know it's a religious obligation, you stand up for it, then alhamdulillah, good thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Like that's a fair perspective.
Yeah,
but I guess it kind of like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, because I was just gonna like add on to kind of the praying like at school and stuff, because I know for me, it wasn't until my last year of high school is when I kind of went up to one of the deans in my school and I said, hey, many of us kind of want to pray like at the school, and we feel like, you know, we've been praying, we've been missing our prayers a lot. And surprisingly, when I told the dean at my school, she said, oh, you know, you're the first person that kind of asked me, can I pray at the school? And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, like out of all the years I was working at this high school, nobody came up to me. So for me, I feel like it's really like there are people out there that are willing to give you that space, but it's really just us kind of going up there and asking. And then unfortunately, like once we kind of asked, not many people were willing to pray. So it was just me and just another 8th grader girl that was just praying. So I feel like it's kind of finding the people who are willing, like just like you said, Brother Hamza, kind of having Nabil and people around you who are like motivated to kind of continue being very pious Muslims. But it was just kind of like crazy to me. It's really ironic that we finally had a space, but then nobody wanted to utilize it. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
I mean, I guess I would also add, like, I don't mean to like say this all to say like, oh, like I did get a prayer space. Like my head of school has been very like receptive and like, you know, reaching out to me, asking like, oh, do you need this, that, and third? Like I feel like she's very like helpful and very like responsive. And I think I'm very privileged to say that, like, you know, I have a principal who would be willing to like help out with that type of thing. But I just know that like in the other spaces that I've been in, it's like I have no idea if this person would have even considered, like, you know what I mean? Like, or at least like had this like, I don't know. I just feel like it's also really difficult too, because like I feel like I know me, so that I mean we're kind of talking about this, but like just the fact that like, you know, when you are born in Islam too, like you low-key have to find Islam first too. Like, you know what I mean? You have to kind of find Islam for yourself and like beyond what your parents have kind of like already fed you, and kind of have that your own little connection with it in order to have like motivation to be like doing anything Islamic related. And so I can kind of like I understand. I feel your parents way, like it's like I feel like yes, I might have had my little spark, but like it's I had a bunch of great like older siblings, and like that's I don't know, like I feel like that's really helped, and like you know, supportive family, whatever. But like I just feel like for like I can't say like that everyone has that privilege to kind of be out here, like, you know, I have my own connection for Islam, I'm gonna go be out here praying at school. Like it's especially when you're like some of the first people, like you know what I mean? Like did anybody like come at any point, or was it just like a y'all kind of stopped?
I feel like it was just we just literally just one day we were kind of, and it's crazy, it was my last year of high school, and I finally kind of came the courage to kind of ask, because I just felt guilty. Like every day we were in class and just prayer was going by and I was like, yeah, I can wait for dismissal. So I was actually shocked when she told me I was like the first ever in her years of like working at the high school. So it kind of made me question like what were the previous Muslims in the school like
Right.
thinking as well. So yeah.
Right. I think like I said, it all comes down to like when we're talking about dawah, it's all about working on ourselves first and working on other Muslims, but really working on our own iman, right? Like when you do that and that's the foundation, like then you get the sohbah. Like I there was this story that this convert, he became Muslim and he like loved Islam and everything. Then he went to the masjid and there was no one at the masjid. Like no one, the Muslims built this masjid, but they didn't pray. So it's sort of like Suhaila's situation, right? You get the prayer space, but then no one's coming. So he came there and he's like, what's going on? Islam's the truth. I found this. Where are all the Muslims? So it was one of these masjids where, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but they have like these reusable topis that they give people, like these little hats. They're like plastic hats because they think like some desis and others think you should cover your head when you pray, even for men. And so he used to take these like reusable topis and he put them in a circle around him after salat, and he'd pray alone and everything. And then he would start speaking to the topis about Islam and like how beautiful it was and everything. And eventually, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala filled those topis with brothers, and people who came, either Muslims who were already Muslim or other people who came back. So like, again, it's dawah really comes down to, when you have that fikr and concern in your heart, then, everything will become easy. Like, I think like, mashallah, what you're sharing, Mariam, about like the worry about asking is, I'm sure so many Muslims out there feel that exact same thing. They want to pray in school, or they have some concern, but they're just afraid of how people are going to react. And then like you have the deeper, or not a deeper, different experience where you actually went and asked, but then you felt let down by your own community. Like I put this effort out, and then now people didn't like respond to it. So I think the solution to all of these issues is really to work on our own iman and our own faith. And like someone gave me a really good piece of advice recently, or it was a saying or something. It was like that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So every person is like the average of their 5 closest friends. Like, so the importance of sohbah, like, and if I think about it, like there are friends of mine, there are a few people that when I'm with them, they always remind me of Allah. Like being with them is just like a reminder, like they're just, mashallah, leading just very pious, upright lives. And I just love spending time with people like that. And when you spend time in a group like that, then you're automatically uplifted and so on. And then there are other people that are really fun to hang out with because like they're great personalities and so on. But you realize I just spent 4 hours with this person and I didn't think about Allah or Islam or maybe I even missed my prayers and so on. And like, that's a choice that we're making. It's not, I'm not saying give up all those other sorts of friends. I mean, I certainly have friends from all walks of life. But definitely try to make sure you have good sohbah. And that's one of the great things about college, I think, as opposed to high school. When I got to college finally, suddenly there were so many more Muslims. I was exposed to like a totally vast array of like different ways of practicing Islam. You can imagine the Harvard Musalla, especially Jummah, you have people coming in like visiting professors and this and that. And it's like, and some people just come because it's the Harvard Jummah, this must be interesting. And so you meet like so many fascinating people, and everyone has such a different relationship with Islam as well. And so on. So anyway, I've been talking way too much.
No, I absolutely agree with what you were saying. And I think that as a Muslim community in general, we often love to place the blame on our current situation externally instead of internally. So we think all the work needs to be done out there. We're totally fine. And that, I guess, goes into dawah as well. So it was interesting with the story with Nabil, you were talking about how he never like outright was like, oh, come to Islam, not like the sort of like Jesus will save you spiel. For him, it was more like he was doing his own ibadah. That was his own like sort of self-betterment. And through him sort of working on his own iman, that's what sort of naturally drew everybody else. And I think, that's a super important point, because not only do we need to like work on our own sort of spiritual infrastructure as like individuals. But I think we also need to work, like you and Suhaila were saying, like the spiritual infrastructure of the community as a whole. There's no point, in my opinion at least, there's like, it's not effective to try to keep preaching Islam to people when once they join your community, there is no, you know, place to welcome them. There is no group of people to like continue teaching them, sort of like filling a bucket that has a hole in it.
Right. On a similar sort of, I just joined LinkedIn. I don't know why. For years and years, everyone was trying to get me to join LinkedIn. I just like, this is stupid. What is this? Another social network. Anyway, I did it, and now it's like amazing. Like I was like, this is the best thing ever. Like because I'm reconnecting with all these different people. But to get to this point that you were just talking about, I reconnected with a friend that I knew from Egypt, a convert and so on. He's Dominican, and fascinating life. He has an MBA and this and that. He was on Wall Street and so on. But essentially, like his life just went south, and it was largely because like the Muslim community abandoned him. They just weren't, you know, he became Muslim. He was all in, all the chips in for Islam, but then the Muslims just weren't there for him when they saw him. I experienced this living with him in Egypt. Like, you know, the cab drivers would like put me up on this pedestal because, oh, you're a white Muslim or whatever, and then he'd be there and they treat him so hard. I mean, that's the problem. Like Islam has not really entered the hearts of most Muslims. Like Islam is perfect, right? But Muslims are hugely imperfect, and we have so much to work on. But the thing is, we also have like this perfect solution. Like we have the Prophet ﷺ as like the perfect messenger, you know, and the Sunnah of the Prophet. And it's not just Sunnah. Like we can also look at it, like use all the tools that you're learning in college, like psychology. One of you, Suhaila, you said you wanted to study psychology. Look at the psychology of the Prophet ﷺ. Like I did a khutbah series about like emotional intelligence, right? And that's like a big buzzword, you know, in the psychology world. If you look at the emotional intelligence of the Prophet ﷺ and of the Sahaba, that was one of the things, spending time with the Tabligis, they used to say that the Sahaba, you know, you can just learn so much from looking at their lives, because every Sahabi had like a different personality. Some were like super strict, you know, and some were, you know, the funny jokers and so on. And they all found their way of worshiping Allah. Like, and so there's lots of like varieties in the way that Islam might manifest itself in your life. It doesn't, like sometimes we just think, oh, that sheikh who's standing on the minbar, or I don't know, there's probably some female version of that. That's the ideal Muslim, and we're just going to fall short of that. That's not the case at all. You can be a Muslim. You can be a great businessman who's a great Muslim. You can be whatever field you want to be in. You can do it, because Islam is not restrictive in that way. Islam opens your mind to understanding the world better. So whatever we do, we can be at the very top of our field. But if we just, you know, always have Islam there, like that, yeah, this is just what I do. Yeah, I have to pray. I think for me, prayer is the main thing, right? Because prayer is inconvenient, right? It's not easy for much of the year, if you're a busy person out and about, to make the time to pray. And so I think a lot of people, what they do in high school is they start doing it after dismissal or whatever, and that leads to, you know, you're in college and you're like, oh, well, it's a little awkward. You can make it. And I mean, I went through this same thing myself. Like, it's not like I was always like this great Muslim, you know, and not that I'm now a great Muslim paragon of virtue or anything. Like we all have our faults and so on. But like when I went, you know, I became Muslim in high school. MashaAllah, I was fairly strong, whatever that means, for like 2.5 years. But towards the end of high school, and during that whole year off, and then my first couple of years at Harvard, like I pretty much got to the point where I actually was leading a double life, you'd say. Like I even had 2 different names, right? I like was Mahbub with the Muslims. So at Jummah, everyone knew me as Mahbub. And then my other name is Marshall, right? And so when I was in the you know, with my roommates and so on, you know, they knew me by a different name. And so that was, you know, I mean, that's a lot of my life in general has always been living in 2 cultures. Like I'm simultaneously in the Muslim culture and in this American culture and so on. And it's sort of being astride those 2 things. Anyway, I can't remember where we're going with this, but it's just bringing up lots of interest, like all this discussion of dawah and you know, it just makes me realize how important it is, and again, not to belabor the point, but how important it is to give dawah to ourselves, to our family members, and so on, as a means of starting that iman. Like you said something like this, you mentioned the metaphor of a spark or something, and there's a hadith about that, like, essentially that, like, I don't remember the exact wording or anything, but like a Muslim whose heart is alive, can warm the other hearts. It's like you light the candle of other people. Like there's all sorts of different metaphors that they've used for this, Hamza, Islam is a very beautiful religion, and there's so many different ways that it manifests itself. And if you just have iman and you really have belief, like, you're just fundamentally, you're going to be able to help other people in whatever it is that you do. I know this isn't the topic that we're on and everything,
No,
but
I genuinely think though that like you're bringing up a lot of, like, whenever you start speaking, you like bring up so many like good points back to back to back. I think like what you're kind of going into is like more about like a combination of like just like the individual and just like your own experience. Like I think like you're bringing up a lot of like good points. Like I think like earlier on you started talking about how like the Prophet ﷺ and like he was like really like he had a high emotional intelligence. Like I think like just the idea that like he that like this, like I guess like his example and stuff was just really like much more than like how I don't know. Like I feel like the common excuse that like people kind of give when it comes to Islam is just the fact that it's like really old and like doesn't apply to now. But like there was just so many layers to it that like that that we kind of like often overlook. I think like the importance of like individuality was just like really like I feel like what kind of struck me there. I forget what like other point you brought up, but I know I mean I was like,
sorry, I know I meander, like that's like, I mean, Amina's had me for 7 years, so she knows. I don't know, it's something about the way my mind works. Like I go down one alley and then I'm like, oh, let's go there, and yeah, thank you, Amina. But alhamdulillah, we get there in the end.
There we go. To go to Maryam's point, I think this is a hadith, I could be wrong, but it basically referred to Islam as a river. So it is clear and it sort of washes away the impurities of the riverbed under it. But at the same time, it's clear and reflects the color of the riverbed under it, meaning that Islam is open to individuality once it takes away sort of those impurities. But also back to your point, Brother Hamza, you were talking about leading double lives. And I think that is something we want to talk about when it comes to dawah. With a lot of young American Muslims, they want to have their Muslim lives and then their sort of American teenager lives, right? Yeah. So like when they're in their Muslim zone, like sure, ask them about Islam. They'd be willing to totally help you out, all that stuff. But like, once they're in school, they're walking to their locker, they're in their American teenager zone, it becomes super uncomfortable for them to sort of always feel like they have to be an ambassador of Islam or representation of like 2 billion people. So I did just want to bring that topic up. And also, how do you balance like knowing that everybody is looking at your character and that your character is a form of dawah, and at the same time not living with that immense pressure of feeling like, you're behind museum glass, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I guess for me, like the double lives thing is like, that's something that you have to work out on your own. Like if we're leading a double life, in my case, what that would mean is like, I was fundamentally like had different practices. Like I was doing like Muslim things with Muslims and then like other, and it's just like at one point I remember Taha, mashallah, is giving the khutbah. He's an amazing brother. And it was just about nifaq and hypocrisy and so on. And I was like, everything he's saying is like, it's like he's speaking directly to me. Like it just like really hit home with me. And so that's, and once, so in other words, I had to work stuff out in my own heart. Like I had to like accept Islam a second time or something, or fully, or whatever the case may be. And at that point, then it, everything else. So in terms of what you're saying, like, I think it is hard, like I was saying before, for sisters, you're visibly Muslim, and so if anyone has a question about Islam, then they're probably going to like come and ask you, and you feel constantly. But I guess some of it is just being comfortable with yourself and your own Islamic practice, and then like it's like if those things happen, like I see it with my wife, like mashallah, she's been, she wasn't a hijabi when she was in college and so on, but she became a hijabi in like her early 20s, mid 20s, and now she's lived for a long time, and it's like she's so comfortable in her skin, so like she doesn't think about it. Like she'll go to the country club up here, and she'll be playing golf like on her own, and like among all these people from very, very different like social background, or not social back, actually they probably are pretty similar, but she looks very different at least. She's just very comfortable, she is who she, and very few people even ask her about Islam, but it's actually nice when people do. It's nice, if someone is brave enough, it's not easy to have that conversation. If they see someone and they want, can I ask you a personal, like religion's one of those taboos you're not supposed to ask people about, right? At least in polite culture or whatever. So if someone takes the time, it is hard, and you might want to table that conversation, be like, this is a really great thing, but can we talk about this over a coffee or something? Because right now we're in the hallway, and I don't know, like you can figure it out. But if someone, I would say that's one of those like little invitations for dawah. Like I've never been a pamphleteer, knock on doors type person giving dawah. We do that with Muslims in Tabligh. You go and you knock on doors, and some Muslims are very upset to have Muslims visit them. Like I remember I visited a guy in, I don't know, Illinois or somewhere, and he like, his name was like Ahmed Muhammad or something, very clearly Muslim and everything, and knocked on the door. He came, and he had like a beer belly, he had a beer in one hand, he's just in like his boxers or something, and we're like, assalamu alaikum. He's like, alaikum salam, like, and then we start telling him, hey, we're from the masjid, and this and that, and inviting him to into the masjid. And so I guess he had some relative that was killed on 9/11, and he like had this like rejection of Islam thing, and he was very, very upset to see us, and I had a few experiences like that, and that reminds you of like the Prophet ﷺ at Ta'if, right? Like it's not like the Prophet ﷺ just had this belief in Islam, and then he just said kun fayakun. That's not a quality of the human being, right? We need to put effort in, right? And so when the Prophet ﷺ went to Ta'if, and he gave da'wah to the to the nobles there, and I'm sure you know the story well, but essentially they kept on rejecting him, and they had different excuses and so on, and then eventually the street urchins came, and they started pelting him with stones so much that the Prophet was bleeding, and his sandals were stuck to his feet, and so on like this, and and like that's what dawah really is, right? He was giving dawah, he was doing it, and he got the result. That hasn't happened to me many times, but to the extent that it has, that's when you're having, when your test is similar to the test of the Prophet, even a much like less formal way, then that's a sign that you've sort of arrived. You're doing something. So it's not going to be easy, But I think Amina was saying something, or one of you was saying something about how, or we've all been saying the Quran is la yughayyiru inna Allah. Okay, Amina, you want to help? Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma bi qawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Something to that effect. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not change the condition of a people or a qawm until they change what is inside of themselves, right? So, and this is, I think, the fundamental truth for all Muslims around the world, and for us as an ummah here in North America and so on, that, anything we want, or any vision we have, we want more masjids, we want more Islamic schools and everything, like it all comes down to us and our own heart and our own iman. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma bi qawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Like we need to change ourselves. So mashallah, CAIR is an amazing organization. I don't know if we're supposed to put a plug in here for the sponsor of this, but CAIR, mashallah, is doing great work, and I've seen what they do for years and years, and as I said before, John Robbins is a friend of mine, and I really respect him. He's also one of the best public speakers around. So anytime he's speaking, you should go and listen, because he always has interesting things to say. He puts a lot of effort in. But like CAIR does great work representing Muslims and representing and standing up for the rights. And they're the sort of, just like Suhaila was brave enough to go to the administration of her school, like that's what CAIR does. If a Muslim is mistreated, in any way, then they're going to stand, because we do have rights, right? I mean, that's one of the things, like, as Americans, alhamdulillah, this country has plenty of problems, and we can talk about that, but it also is a place where you have rights. We have a constitution, we have things, where, they're essentially, they don't have the choice to say no when we say, can we have a place to, you don't need to go that like nuclear option. Usually just having a conversation will work. But ultimately, when you're strong in your belief and you're like, this is my deen, like I have to practice my deen, khalas, like, then people will respect that, and it'll be fine. Okay. You should just do some signal to make me stop talking, Amina. Like, you know me well enough to, my wife is good at that.
I'll close this out, but I think there's a ton of like really great lessons like kind of embedded throughout like all of what you were saying, like and I think like you pretty much, like, I don't know how you ended up back to CAIR Massachusetts, but that was just a really great transition. I think because of time we should probably just wrap up here. I'm not sure if Amina or Suhaila wanted to like leave off with one little like last pointer about dawah that, like, I don't know, that you kind of like took away from this conversation.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what you remember from what we said, because I don't remember what I just said. Like
I was actually just going to bring up this one last point of, throughout the conversation, we were talking about really positive dawah experiences, sort of Brother Hamzah's relationship with Nabil, all that stuff. But then you brought up Ta'if, which was a really interesting point, because it's sort of the opposite of what good dawah ends up being, right? It's instead of, informing people about Islam and them being respectful, or at least just like normal, it's them having a very visceral reaction to that. So I wanted to see if we could quickly touch up on.
Right. Well, I think what I would say before we do that is, if you look at the Ta'if story in more depth, it's an incredible story about like real dawah. So if you remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deputed angels to the Prophet and said, asked him all these different questions, and essentially he had the choice to destroy the city, like, and he had like the power of like Allah's army to like destroy the city. And so that could have been the choice that he made, but of course he said, as we probably know, like, no, because even if they don't accept Islam, then maybe among their progeny there will be Muslims. And so actually the person who brought Islam to the subcontinent, which is now like where most Muslims live, right, India, Pakistan, was from Ta'if. Right, so he was someone who later, was from Ta'if and obviously became Muslim, as the rest of Hijaz and so on. And he later was a trader, and he brought Islam to the subcontinent and so on. And so this dua of the Prophet and the decision not to like eliminate Ta'if and all be out of anger was the reason. I mean, in some ways, it's the reason why like many people are Muslim today, including even me. I mean, Nabil's Desi, like maybe that's. Ultimately, if you trace his family tree, it probably comes back to the same incident, which comes back to the Prophet, right? Like, so, so whatever happened, when you put your niyyah for the sake of Allah, then whatever happens is like gravy. I mean, that's one of the, the hadith, like, I need to remember all these in Arabic because they're so much better in Arabic, but the ajiba bi amr al-muslim, that hadith, Amina, like, I'm amazed by the matter of a Muslim, like whatever happens to him is khair. إذا أصابت شرًا, like if something bad happens to him, then he says, what does he say? Sorry, I'm
like something like he finds something good in it, or
right, or he said he's patient. If something bad happens, you're patient. If something good happens, you say Alhamdulillah. If something bad happens, you're patient. And either way, you're getting reward from Allah. Right? Like, so whatever condition we have in our life, we can always get reward from Allah. And I think this brings up a good point. Like, Hamza, I love Islam, but my knowledge of Islam is pretty like I wish that I had invested more. Like, I wish I had the opportunity, like Amina, mashallah, had to go to a place like Al-Nur, not to put in another plug, but where you have like a teacher like Brother Sufyan who knows so much, and like where you can learn so much at that young age, where you're like sponges for knowledge. Like, it's really, like, mashallah, there so many of the students at Al-Nur, I would say, have more knowledge of Islam and than I do, even now, after being Muslim for 25 years. Now, obviously, knowledge is one thing, and understanding and practice is a different thing, and that comes with wisdom and the tawfiq from Allah, and like a lot of other things, but I think it is really important to invest in that knowledge, and like I said, to surround yourself with good suhbah. If you change your own qawm, like, you can't control all of America or all of Boston or all of your school, but you can control like that small circle that you let into your inner circle, and when you change that, that will change yourself. That's you are the average of your 5 best people, your 5 closest people. If you find those 5 people, and I think it's much easier once you get to college, there's so many more people there, and they don't, honestly, I don't want to make it sound like they always have to be Muslim. I was talking to Nail and Maria. Sorry, I know this is going way too long, but they were saying that when they were in school, because okay, so I have my own children now, and so some of their friends are like getting into like stuff that I'm like not super comfortable with my kids hanging out, and so we were asking like, what should we do? Should we keep letting? And so Maria said that her parents like were very, very strict with her as a kid. She never got to go to any sleepovers. People thought she was sort of like and they were just sort of restricted. She had like one best friend and someone her parents really approved of, and that's who it was. And so she felt like she was missing out. Like she totally, and someone said, whatever you're missing out on, you'll get later in life. And sure enough, when she came to Boston, now she has an amazing community of good friends. And like that, I think this gets into more of a parenting type issue, but it's important to figure out, like, now that you guys are more or less adults, like, you get to choose who your group of people is. But if there happen to be any parents listening, we have more say over who our own children hang out with. And it's okay for them they don't all have to be pious Muslims. Like, sometimes like the nerdy kid in school, like in the public school, is like going to be a really good friend, right? And someone like, that you can learn so much from, and you don't need to like be exclusive and like, I'm not going to have any contact with because ultimately, if you're going to give dawah, you're going to give dawah to your friends. Like, trying to just form these little communities of just Muslims where we only interact with one another, that's problematic. Like, I think Islam spreads because Muslims go and they live in the community and they practice their deen, and they say, "Kunu mithlina," be like us. That was the simple dawah. Like, the entire message of dawah, like in the subcontinent, like that guy from Ta'if, was "Kunu mithlina," be like us. And like, people wanted to be like them because they were amazing people and they were like fully realized human beings. And and we have that same opportunity. But it's difficult. It's so difficult to find that peace and tranquility and that within Islam. What I would say is, like, if you find a group where your iman feels good, like for me, it's been that group, the Tablighi Jamaat. Whenever I've spent time with them, I don't go for 4 months a year and 40 days a year and things like that. I wish I did. I wish I had the strength to do that and so on. But every time I'm with those brothers, they remind me of Allah, and it's like very, very powerful. And like, find people like that in your life and fill your life with them, inshallah. So anyway, that's long story short.
I guess we can kind of like pass it off to Suhaila, and I mean, it's kind of like give us the last little thing.
But yeah, so basically, just from hearing Brother Hamza's conversation, I feel like I was able to like learn a lot. I think with the journey of da'wah, of course, it's pretty long. It never really ends. You're still learning about Islam, and it still continues. But really, it starts with the individual gaining your ilm, surrounding yourself with people of your ilm. I feel like that also kind of lessens the burden of like kind of continuing da'wah. And another thing is that, and I was also tested with this as well, is like that way you will, things will not go your way, as you kind of provided the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu kind of story, that, your sincerity will be tested, right? For me, once I kind of requested the prayer space, I could have just taken that as, okay, I mean, since the majority is not gonna, utilize that space, I could have just, sat down with the rest. But, Allah kind of wanted to test my truthfulness, like my sincerity. So I kind of took that as advantage. So I feel like kind of hearing those stories, people look at you differently and stuff, is that, your sincerity will be tested no matter what. So the journey of da'wah not only is about your individual and gaining knowledge, but it's just how well are you going to kind of sacrifice yourself and be well as a Muslim to kind of please Allah, because essentially that was da'wah is, and like that's the submission of Islam. That's like literally the whole like main purpose, right? So I feel like that is something now I'm going to take on and continue learning on. And I feel like hearing from Brother Hamzah's story, I feel like that kind of portrays that sense as well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think also something that always strikes me about the story, like I've heard it a few times already, but it never fails to impress me how old he was. And to think of like his priorities at like 14, 15 were not my priorities at 14 and 15. And so like bringing this back to the fact that this is a youth podcast, like if there's any, Muslim teenagers listening, like this is a very real topic that is very applicable to us. We like to often sort of say, that's for when I'm older and more knowledgeable, but like people can be affected by the way that we act. And so always being aware of that fact and knowing that you play a role in the Muslim dawah scene. And because of that, internal work is needed and personal growth should happen. I think that's just the main takeaway for me from this story.
Right. Yeah, 50. I mean, yeah, you guys have the most influence. I mean, I've been a teacher for a long time. I have very little influence on the kids compared to their peers. And when you have peers who are strong and like, mashallah, like Amin is a great example of this, not to embarrass you, but like great examples who you can point out. You want to be like, how do we do this like high school Muslim American female thing? Like, oh well, look at Amina, like mashallah, she's doing so many great things, and look at these, and there are other students, like I mean it's amazing, like mashallah, you guys are great that this is how you're spending your summer. Like think of all the other things you could be doing. Like you guys are like mashallah putting the time in, thinking about your fellow Muslim teens and so on, and it's excellent. And I hope there are brothers doing this work too, because it seems like mashallah sisters do all the effort in so many areas of life, and the brothers need to step up their game, because mashallah we do have a tech brother, so alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, brother Muhammad, alhamdulillah.
But yeah, I think last thing I would add is like kind of like connected to what Amina was kind of talking about, like just the sense that like I guess a good place to always start is really just trying to like, I guess this, I know it's gonna sound a little bad, but like low key just focus on like the fact that like, you are Muslim, and your peers kind of see you as like you're like, you might just be the only Muslim that they know. So maybe just kind of using that as motivation to kind of like get yourself started, but like ultimately like trying to aim for a place where everybody else's opinion is just irrelevant, and you can only worry about the way Allah sees you, and like just and try to have your end goal be like that place, the place that you like kind of strive for. But yeah, with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you again, Brother Hamzah, for pulling up and being our guest speaker for this Dawah podcast. And
my pleasure. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, everyone.
Jazakallah khair. And yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.